The city lights were glowing and cars rushed past on the busy road. People moved quickly, heads down, chasing their lives. In the middle of this noise, a billionaire stepped out of his black car. He had just closed a huge deal. His smile carried pride. But behind that smile was a secret night he thought was long forgotten. Months ago in his giant mansion he had spent one careless night with his maid. It was a moment he pushed away from his mind. A mistake he never wanted to face again. He believed it was buried in silence, but destiny had its own plan. One evening as he walked through a crowded street, his eyes caught something that froze his steps. Under the flickering light of a street lamp sat two small children, their clothes torn, their hands clutching each other tightly, their faces pale from hunger. People passed by without a glance. But the billionaire could not move. His chest grew heavy, because those faces, those innocent eyes, they looked just like him. His heart skipped, his breath grew uneven. A strange fear gripped him. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was his imagination. Yet the more he stared, the more he saw himself reflected in them. The curve of their cheeks, the sharpness of their eyes, the same dark hair, it was undeniable. These starving twins on the street looked like his own blood. He stepped closer slowly, his polished shoes echoing on the pavement. The children noticed him and their little hands tightened around each other, their eyes wide with fear. One of them held out a tiny hand, whispering for food. The other hid behind, too weak to speak. The billionaire felt something he had never felt before, guilt, sharp and cutting. He bent down and asked softly where their mother was. But before they could answer, a tired voice called from behind. A woman appeared, thin, worn out, her face pale but still carrying traces of beauty. And in that instant his world collapsed. It was her, the maid, the same woman from that night. She froze when her eyes met his, her body stiffened, and silence grew heavy between them. She pulled the children close and tried to turn away. But he stepped forward, his voice trembling as he called her name. She did not reply. She only whispered to the twins to keep walking. The billionaire stood still, his powerful presence useless in that moment. He watched as she guided the children into the dark alley, disappearing into shadows. His mind spun with memories. He remembered her laughter in the kitchen, her gentle hands cleaning his desk, the way she had looked at him that night. A mix of fear and confusion. He had treated it as nothing, but now seeing her in rags, struggling to feed their children, it stabbed his pride. His heart thumped. Questions stormed his head. Why had she not told him? Why were they on the street? What had happened to her life after she left his mansion? The next day he could not focus. Meetings blurred. Deals meant nothing. His mind was chained to those twins. He sent his driver to follow them quietly. He needed to know where they lived. Late that night the driver returned with details. They were staying in an abandoned building at the edge of the city. No electricity, no heat. Broken windows covered with plastic. Inside a weak fire flickered. The maid and the twins huddled together for warmth. The billionaire went there himself, standing at a distance, watching from the shadows. The sight shattered him. He had mansions, cars, treasures. Yet his own children were starving in ruins. Every night he returned secretly, watching them struggle. He saw the maid skipping her meals to feed the twins. He saw her working small jobs during the day, carrying heavy boxes, cleaning shops, coming home exhausted but still smiling faintly for her children. He saw the twins searching trash bins for scraps, laughing faintly to hide their hunger. Every scene burned inside him. He wanted to step forward, to help, but fear held him back. What if she rejected him? What if the world discovered the truth? His empire could crumble, his name dragged through dirt. But each time he saw those innocent faces, the battle inside grew stronger. One stormy night rain poured heavily, the city drowned in water, thunder shook the skies. The billionaire once again drove to the broken shelter. As he stepped out with an umbrella he saw the children shivering in soaked clothes. The maid tried to cover them with her own body. Her lips blue with cold. He could not bear it. He rushed forward, dropping the umbrella. Kneeling in the mud, he wrapped his coat around the twins. The maid gasped, shocked, her eyes wide with anger and pain. She tried to push him away, but he held the children gently, whispering that they needed warmth. She pulled them back, shouting that his money and pity meant nothing, that he had no right to appear now. Her words cut deeper than knives, but he did not move. He begged her to let him help, his voice low, almost broken. The children looked between them, confused, too young to understand but sensing something. Their small hands reached toward him again, not with fear this time, but with hope. The maid's tears mixed with the rain, her lips trembled. For years she had carried the burden alone. Now the man who once turned away stood before her, shattered. The storm raged around them, but inside it was silence, a silence heavy with truth. The billionaire knew nothing would ever be the same. The careless night he thought forgotten had returned with faces, voices, and lives that needed him. As thunder cracked above, he made a silent promise that no matter what it cost, he would not walk away again. The twins clung to their mother, staring at him with eyes that mirrored his own. And in that moment he realized fate had tied him to them forever, whether he was ready or not. His life had changed completely. The next morning the billionaire woke restless. Sleep had not touched him. His mind replayed the sight of the twins huddled in the rain, their mother's trembling face, and her words slicing through his pride. He went to his office, but the numbers on the screen blurred, voices of his partners sounded distant. He excused himself and left. His driver asked where to go, but he gave no answer. His heart pulled him back to that broken shelter at the edge of the city. When he reached there, the children were sitting on the steps, their small hands clutching each other. The maid was gone, probably searching for work. The billionaire walked closer, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. The children looked up with wide eyes, fear mixed with curiosity. One of them asked softly if he had food. His chest tightened, and without thinking he rushed to the car, bringing back a bag of bread and fruit. The twins grabbed it, eating hungrily. Crumbs falling on their worn clothes, he watched them silently. Each bite they took felt like a wound in his heart. He realized how blind he had been to the real struggles of people outside his golden world. When the maid returned, carrying a torn bag of groceries, she stopped in shock. Her eyes darted from the billionaire to her children chewing happily. Rage flashed in her gaze. She demanded to know what he was doing there. He tried to explain, his voice softer than ever, telling her he only wanted to help. But she cut him off, accusing him of trying to buy forgiveness. She shouted that his wealth meant nothing, that his mistake had destroyed her life. She said when she left his mansion she was already carrying the weight of their secret, and when she tried to survive, doors shut, people mocked, no one helped. Her words shook him. Guilt rose like fire inside him. But he did not defend himself. He simply listened, for the first time truly hearing her pain. Later that night when the children slept, he stood outside the shelter again, hidden by shadows. He saw her sitting by the dim fire, staring blankly, her eyes hollow yet burning with silent strength. He wanted to walk in, to kneel, to beg, but fear chained him. So instead he decided on another path. He called his assistant secretly, ordering background checks. He wanted to know every detail of what had happened to her after leaving his mansion. The report arrived within days, and every page was a dagger, eviction notices, unpaid hospital bills, endless small jobs under cruel employers, rejection letters from schools when she tried to enroll the twins. She had fought alone against the world. While he lived in glittering towers, his hands trembled as he read. The next week he began helping in secret. Hospital debts cleared overnight, her groceries paid by anonymous donors, the shelter suddenly repaired by unseen hands. But she was not a fool. She noticed, and suspicion grew. One evening she confronted him in the alley, her voice low but sharp, asking if he was behind all this. He admitted softly, his eyes heavy with guilt, saying he could not erase the past but he could make their present bearable. She shook her head, tears filling her eyes, saying, no amount of money could undo the nights her children went hungry, the times they cried in the dark, the humiliation she endured. He wanted to speak but his voice broke. One night the twins fell ill with fever, their bodies weak and shaking. Panic filled the small room. The maid tried to cool them with wet cloths, whispering prayers. The billionaire arrived unannounced, his doctors rushing behind him. She resisted at first, but when the children groaned in pain, her defenses cracked. She allowed them to be treated. The billionaire held one twin's hand, feeling their small pulse, and for the first time tears rolled down his face. His empire had never brought him to his knees, but this moment did. The maid watched silently, her anger melting into something else, something she did not want to admit. The following days he visited daily, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit quietly. The twins began to smile when they saw him, climbing onto his lap without fear, calling him uncle without knowing the truth. He laughed with them, his heart both warmed and crushed, because deep inside he knew they were more than strangers. They were his own flesh and blood. But the fear of saying it out loud hung heavy. The maid noticed the bond forming. Her eyes softened but her walls stayed firm. She told him he could never claim them unless he first admitted the truth, in front of everyone, not in shadows, not in secrecy. His throat tightened, because that truth could ruin everything he had built. Yet as he looked into the twins' innocent eyes, he wondered for the first time what mattered more, his empire or his children. Days turned into weeks and the billionaire's life slowly split into two worlds. In the daylight he stood in boardrooms, commanding men in suits, signing contracts worth millions, his voice strong and steady. But when the sun sank and darkness spread, he found himself driving back to the edge of the city, to that broken shelter where his heart now lived. The twins would run to him, their laughter echoing in the cold alley, their tiny hands clutching his sleeves. They told him about their little adventures, how they chased stray cats or found coins on the ground. He listened with a smile that his partners had never seen, yet behind that smile was a storm, because each story they told of hunger and struggle reminded him of his failure. The maid watched quietly, sometimes allowing the children to sit with him, sometimes pulling them back, her eyes always sharp, reminding him she had not forgiven. One evening as he brought warm clothes for the twins, she stopped him at the doorway, her voice calm but cutting. She told him to stop visiting, that his presence confused the children, that they needed stability, not broken promises. He stood frozen, his heart heavy. He asked her if she hated him so much she would deny her children the chance at a better life. She replied coldly that they were her children. She had raised them alone, and she would not let them be used as pawns in his guilty conscience. Her words haunted him all night. He drank alone in his mansion, staring at the empty halls. The silence felt louder than the city noise. He realized for the first time how meaningless his wealth was. Gold walls and marble floors could not silence the voices of those twins calling him uncle. The next morning he made a decision. He could not stay in shadows forever. He had to face the truth. He called his lawyers and demanded a private DNA test. They warned him about the risks, that if the truth came out it could spark scandals, investors could flee, rivals would attack. But he silenced them, his voice low and firm, saying he needed to know. The results came days later in a sealed envelope. His hands shook as he tore it open, and there it was, undeniable. The twins were his knees weakened, he sat in silence, the world spinning. That evening he walked to the shelter, the envelope still in his hand. He found the maid cooking a thin soup, the twins asleep beside her. He placed the paper on the table. She glanced at it, her face pale. She already knew what it contained, but she did not touch it. Instead she looked at him with tired eyes and said she never needed proof. She had lived with it every day in their smiles, in their voices, in their pain. He asked her why she never told him. Her voice cracked as she explained how she feared being thrown out, how she knew no one would believe her against a powerful man, how she chose silence and struggled alone. His chest tightened, shame burning him from inside. He reached for her hand but she pulled back, saying it was too late. The children needed more than money. They needed love, protection, and truth. At that moment the twins stirred, one of them waking up, rubbing sleepy eyes, seeing him. The child crawled into his lap without hesitation, laying their head on his chest, his throat closed. He held the small body close. The other twin followed, wrapping arms around his side. The maid turned away, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. The billionaire sat frozen, the weight of his empire lighter than the weight of two tiny arms holding him. He knew then that no matter the cost, no matter the scandal, he could not walk away again. The secret night had returned, and it demanded not silence but courage, and though fear coiled in his chest, he felt a strange strength rising, the strength not of a billionaire, but of a father who had finally seen his children. The news of the billionaire spending time in the poor district did not stay hidden for long. Whispers spread through the city, workers talked, drivers talked, neighbors talked, and soon the rumors reached the glossy offices where his rivals waited like wolves. Questions began to rise. Why would a man of his power visit broken alleys night after night? Why was he seen with a woman and two children dressed in rags? The rumors grew teeth. Some said he had a secret family, others said he was being blackmailed. Reporters tried to chase the story, but every time they got close he silenced them with his influence. Still the whispers refused to die. The maid noticed the change. She saw men watching from cars, cameras hidden. She grew restless. She begged him to stay away, saying his presence only brought danger to their fragile life. But he could not stop. He had tasted the warmth of the twins' laughter, and he could no longer live without it. One evening he sat in his mansion, Board members gathered for dinner, expensive wine flowing, but their words cut sharper than glass. They laughed about a woman begging with children, mocking her misery. One man joked that the twins looked like someone they knew. Another smirked that perhaps the mighty billionaire had more secrets than anyone guessed. His hand clenched around the glass until it cracked. His eyes burning with fury, he stood abruptly. Silencing the room, he told them never to speak of her again, his tone cold enough to freeze blood. The men shifted uncomfortably, but in their silence he knew the damage was done. They already suspected. That night he returned to the shelter. The maid was waiting, her face pale. Her hands trembling. She had heard about men asking questions. She told him the children were no longer safe. She planned to leave the city before more harm came. His heart dropped. He begged her not to go. He promised protection. But she shook her head, saying his world and her world could never mix. She said his empire was built on power and appearances. Hers was built on survival. The clash would destroy both. His chest ached as he realized she meant it. He watched her pack what little she owned, the twins clutching their few toys. He felt powerless. The same man who controlled industries could not stop a woman from walking away. In desperation he made a call. His security team doubled their watch. Hidden guards were placed around the shelter. Though she never knew, he could not let them vanish into the night. At the same time he began moving quietly, shifting funds, preparing documents, arranging plans that even his closest partners did not see. Because for the first time his empire was not his priority. Those children were, yet the pressure outside grew heavier. Newspapers printed half-truths. Photos of him near the alley appeared on gossip sites. Headlines screamed questions about a secret family. His board grew restless. Investors whispered. He was trapped between two fires. One evening the maid confronted him, her eyes blazing. She asked him if he had brought this storm to her doorstep, if his weakness had dragged attention to their lives. He fell silent, unable to deny. She told him to leave for good, her voice breaking as she said the children deserved peace, not chaos. He wanted to argue but the twins appeared. Their eyes filled with fear after hearing raised voices. They clung to their mother. And in that moment he knew words would not win, only actions could. He walked away, his steps heavy, his chest hollow. But inside his mind one thought echoed again and again. If he could not protect them as a man in shadows, then he would face the world in light. No matter the cost, he would claim them, he would fight for them, and he would never let them starve again. The storm around the billionaire grew louder. The tabloids were hungry. Gossip shows shouted about a mystery woman and children linked to him. His board demanded answers. Investors threatened to pull out. Rivals smiled in secret, waiting for his downfall. He sat in his office surrounded by glass walls and city lights, yet he felt caged. His hands gripped the desk as memories of the twins filled his mind. He thought of their small hands tugging his sleeve, their soft voices calling him uncle. And then he thought of the maid's trembling voice telling him to leave. His pride battled his guilt, his empire battled his heart. But every time he closed his eyes he saw their hungry faces on the street, and in the end the father inside him won. He stood from his chair, his decision clear. He would not hide anymore. The next day he called his lawyers and advisors, their faces pale as he told them his plan. They warned him of the cost, of the scandal that would explode. They said billions could be lost overnight. They said the board might push him out. But he silenced them with a single sentence, that no empire was worth more than his children. The words shocked even him. Yet once spoken he felt lighter, as if chains had broken. He ordered them to prepare everything for a court hearing, because if the maid refused his money, then the truth had to be written in law. Meanwhile the maid struggled in the shelter. She noticed strangers following her, taking photos, whispering. The pressure broke her sleep. The twins asked why men with cameras waited outside. She pulled them close, tears in her eyes. She wished she could disappear. She cursed the night she had stepped into the billionaire's world. Yet deep inside she feared something more, that the storm was not just about shame but about the truth she could no longer deny. When he appeared at her door with papers in his hand she nearly slammed it shut, but he begged her to listen, his voice heavy. He told her the case was set, that the truth of the twins' bloodline would be proven in front of everyone. Her body froze, her eyes filling with fear. She shouted that he was dragging the children into fire, but he whispered that they were already burning. The day of the first hearing came. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the halls. Flashes of cameras blinded them as they walked inside. The maid held the twins tightly, her face pale but strong. The billionaire walked beside them, silent, his head high. Whispers exploded around the room. Lawyers shouted, papers rustled, and the judge called for order. The maid felt her knees weaken. But when she looked at her children, she stood firm. When she saw the billionaire staring at them with eyes full of shame and determination, her heart twisted. The opening arguments began. The lawyers for the billionaire declared that the case was not about money but about truth. His rivals sneered, whispering that his empire would crumble. But he never looked at them. His eyes never left the twins. That night the city buzzed with the story. Headlines screamed about the billionaire's secret children. Social media burned with debates. Some called him a monster, some called him brave. But the twins were too young to understand. They only knew the world had turned its eyes on them. They clung to their mother's hands, asking why people shouted their names. The billionaire watched from the shadows, anger and sorrow twisting inside him. He knew the battle had just begun. And he also knew the road ahead would break him or save him. But one thing was certain, he would not walk away. The careless night of the past had chained him forever. And he was ready to fight the entire world. If it meant those two innocent children would never beg on the streets again. The courtroom battles dragged on. Every hearing became a storm. Reporters waited outside like vultures, snapping pictures every time the billionaire stepped in. The maid tried to shield the twins, covering their faces. But the whispers followed them everywhere. Inside the court the billionaire's lawyers fought hard, presenting documents, witnesses, even the DNA test results. Each piece of evidence pushed the truth closer. The judge listened carefully. The rivals watched with hidden smiles, hoping for a crack that would destroy him. The maid sat silent most days, her eyes red but her back straight. She refused to let the world see her weakness. She answered questions only when forced, telling the court about nights when her children went hungry, about jobs she lost because people mocked her, about the pain of raising them alone while the man who should have stood beside her lived in mansions. Her voice shook the room. Even hardened lawyers lowered their eyes. The billionaire sat still, his face pale, his chest burning with shame. But the war was not only in the courtroom. Outside his empire shook, stock prices dropped. Shareholders demanded his resignation. The media painted him as reckless. Some called him a hero, others a liar. His rivals plotted in dark rooms, whispering how to take over his throne. Yet he remained calm in public, his silence stronger than their noise. But inside he was torn. The maid's words replayed in his head each night, telling him that money could never replace years of suffering. He wandered his mansion halls alone, rooms echoing with emptiness, and he thought of the twins, their laughter, their small arms around him. The only thing that gave him strength to rise again each morning. One evening after a long hearing, the maid found him waiting outside near the old shelter, his suit wet from the rain, his eyes tired. She tried to walk past but he stepped forward, his voice low. He told her he never wanted to drag her into this storm but the world had already chosen. He said he would rather lose everything than lose them. She froze, the rain sliding down her face like tears. She whispered that the twins were all she had. She could not trust him to take them. He shook his head, saying he did not want to take them away. He wanted to stand beside them, to protect them, to give them a life free of hunger. She searched his eyes, seeing something different, not the arrogance of a billionaire, but the desperation of a man broken by love. Still her heart battled her fear. As weeks passed the twins grew more attached. In court they often slipped from her arms and ran toward him, hugging his legs, calling him uncle in front of everyone. The cameras flashed wildly. The world saw the bond before the truth was even declared. The judge noticed too, his gaze softening, and the public began to divide, some saying the maid was cruel for hiding the children, others saying the billionaire was heartless for leaving them in the first place. But none could deny the power of blood, the connection too clear to ignore. One night the billionaire sat with the twins in the shelter, telling them stories by the weak light of a candle, their laughter filling the room. The maid stood at the doorway, her arms crossed, but a tear slipped down her cheek. She saw the children happy, truly happy, and she hated herself for feeling relief, because it meant she could not deny him forever. The battle inside her raged, pride against forgiveness, fear against hope, and though she turned away quickly, she knew the truth in her heart. He was no longer just the man from that careless night. He was their father, and whether she admitted it or not, their future was already tied to him. The story spread beyond the city. National news carried it, channels debated it, and every corner of society had an opinion. Some defended the billionaire, saying he was brave for stepping forward. Others attacked him, calling him selfish for protecting his empire while the maid struggled alone. The noise grew unbearable. The board of his company demanded his resignation. Investors threatened lawsuits, but he stood his ground. His silence in business meetings was no longer a weakness but a warning. His rivals began pushing harder, digging deeper. One day leaked documents appeared online. They claimed the twins were not his, that the maid had been with other men. The world gasped. The headlines screamed betrayal. The maid cried in fury. She knew the lies were planted. She stormed into the courtroom, demanding to face the men who spread them. Her voice rose, telling everyone she had lived with truth every single day, and no false paper could erase it. The judge silenced the room, ordering further investigation. The billionaire's jaw clenched as he watched, rage boiling because he knew exactly who had planted the rumors. Behind closed doors his enemies met, smug smiles on their faces. They thought they had cornered him. But what they did not know was that he had already begun moving pieces in silence. His investigators gathered proof of their corruption, their bribes, their crimes buried under layers of lies. He built a case quietly, waiting for the right moment. Yet the pressure on the maid grew unbearable. Reporters chased her through markets. Children mocked the twins in the street, calling them bastards. She broke down one night, clutching them to her chest, whispering that she would take them far away, away from the noise, away from him. When he arrived to see her packing bags, his heart dropped. He begged her not to run. He told her leaving would not save them. The world would follow. But she shook her head, tears streaming. She said she had lived years without him. She could live again. The twins clung to his legs, crying, refusing to leave him, their small voices pleading for him to come with them. The maid froze, her heart splitting. She saw the bond too clearly now. It was no longer only her blood that held them. It was his as well. The billionaire knelt before her, his voice breaking. He swore he would burn his empire to ash before he let anyone harm them. She stared at him, torn between distrust and the truth in his eyes. At last she dropped the bag, her shoulders shaking. She whispered that if he truly meant it, then he must prove it, not with money, not with words, but with sacrifice. The next court session became a battlefield, his rivals confident, their lawyers sharp, but the billionaire shocked everyone. Instead of defending his empire, he handed over files exposing their crimes. The courtroom erupted as judges read evidence of fraud and corruption. The men who mocked him now scrambled, their faces pale, their voices trembling. The media turned instantly, from calling him a villain to a warrior who tore apart corruption. The maid watched in silence, her eyes wide. She had expected him to fight for himself, but instead he burned bridges to protect her and the twins. The scandal destroyed many, but it lifted him higher in truth. The judge announced that the case would move forward with honesty. The DNA proof confirmed, the lies of rivals discarded. That night the city roared with headlines again. But this time they called him fearless. They called him a father, and while his empire trembled, while billions hung in risk, he felt lighter than ever. Because when he returned to the shelter, the twins ran into his arms, laughing, their small hands holding him tightly. The maid stood behind them, her face unreadable, but her eyes no longer carried only anger. In the silence of that moment he knew he had begun to earn something more powerful than forgiveness. He had begun to earn trust. The courtroom days stretched longer and longer, each session pulling hidden truths into light. The world watched with hungry eyes. Newspapers printed his face on every page, calling him the billionaire who chose blood over empire. His rivals tried every last trick. Witnesses brought false stories, lawyers twisted words, but each time the judge demanded proof, their lies collapsed under the weight of evidence. The billionaire remained silent through most of it, his eyes steady, his focus fixed only on the twins sitting in the gallery with their mother. Their innocent faces the only reason he endured. The maid sat beside them, her body stiff, her heart torn. Every time the twins reached for him, her defenses weakened. Every time they smiled at him, her chest ached with a feeling she did not want to name. Behind the scenes his world still burned, stock markets trembled, his name dragged through every headline, powerful allies distanced themselves. But he did not fight to save his wealth. Instead he sold parts of his empire quietly, liquidating assets to secure a trust fund for the twins. His advisors screamed in protest, warning him he was destroying everything he had built. But he turned away, saying the children's future was worth more than gold. When the maid learned of this, she confronted him, her voice sharp, asking why he would throw away an empire just to prove himself. He looked at her, his eyes hollow but honest, and told her he had finally realized an empire without family was nothing but stone. The pressure grew dangerous. One night men followed him from the courthouse, shadows slipping closer. They tried to corner him in a dark street. But his guards fought them off. The message was clear. His rivals were not only fighting in court. They wanted to end him outside as well. He returned to the shelter with bruises on his face. The twins gasped and rushed to him, their small hands touching his wounds. The maid froze, her heart tightening. She saw the man she once hated bleeding because he refused to walk away. She wanted to stay strong, but that night when the twins slept she whispered to him in the dark, asking why he kept coming back despite the cost. His answer was simple, because they were his. The final days of trial drew near. The judge announced that soon a decision would be made. The city buzzed with anticipation. Some wanted to see him fall, others wanted to see redemption. Inside the courtroom tension thickened. The maid was called to testify again. Her voice steady as she told the world how she raised the twins alone, how she worked until her hands bled, how she feared every knock on the door. Her words silenced the room. Then the billionaire was asked to speak. He stood tall, his voice calm but heavy. He admitted his mistake that night. He admitted his absence. He admitted his shame. But he ended with a vow, saying he would never again abandon the children or their mother, even if it cost him every coin he owned. The courtroom stirred. The judge's gavel struck for silence. When they left the court that evening, cameras flashing, crowds shouting, the twins clung to both of them at once, one hand in their mother's, one hand in his. The maid tried to pull them back, but her heart betrayed her. She let it happen. For the first time walking beside him in public, the city froze at the sight. The image of the powerful billionaire, not with partners or guards, but with a broken woman and two children who held him like their world. And in that moment the story shifted. It was no longer about scandal or empire. It was about blood, truth, and a man who was willing to lose everything just to hold on to what should have been his from the beginning. The day of judgment arrived. The courthouse overflowed with people. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters screamed questions. The world waited to see if the billionaire would rise or fall. Inside the air was heavy. The judge entered and silence fell. The maid held the twins close, her hands trembling though she tried to hide it. The billionaire sat across the room, his face pale but calm, his eyes never leaving the children. The rivals' lawyers made their final arguments, trying to twist the story once more. They claimed the maid was chasing wealth, that the billionaire was manipulated. But the judge raised a hand, his eyes cold. He said the truth was already clear. Then he called for the last piece of evidence. The DNA results sealed in a folder. The clerk stepped forward, opening it slowly, every eye in the room locked on the paper. The judge read aloud the words that shattered all doubt. The twins were undeniably his children. Gasps erupted, whispers filled the courtroom like a storm. Some people clapped, others shook their heads. The rivals' faces drained of color, their lies now ashes. The billionaire closed his eyes, the weight of years lifting and crashing down at the same time. The maid covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling. The twins looked around confused but sensed the importance. One of them asked softly if it meant he was their father. The billionaire's throat tightened. He could not speak. He only nodded. The twins broke into small smiles and ran toward him, their little arms wrapping around his legs. The cameras flashed wildly, capturing the moment that would be remembered forever. The judge banged the gavel, declaring that the truth was established. The billionaire was the father, and from that day forward his duty was to provide and protect. But the judge added more, saying fatherhood was not only about money, it was about presence, about love, about sacrifice. His words pierced the billionaire's heart. He nodded silently, accepting the weight. The rivals tried one last desperate move, demanding custody battles. But the judge dismissed them, saying the children had already chosen with their hearts. The courtroom doors opened as the crowd outside roared, chanting, some cheering, some cursing. But all eyes were fixed on the billionaire holding the twins. That night the news exploded. Headlines declared the scandal ended. The billionaire exposed as a father. Images of him carrying the twins filled every screen. Some called it redemption. Some called it disgrace. But none could deny the power of the moment. In his mansion he sat with the children for the first time without hiding, their laughter echoing through halls that once felt empty. The maid stood at the doorway, uncertain, her heart torn between anger and relief. She whispered that nothing would be easy, that forgiveness was not yet his. He looked at her, his voice low but steady. saying he did not expect forgiveness, only a chance to make things right. The twins interrupted, tugging at both of them, begging them to sit together. Their innocent voices left no room for refusal. The maid hesitated but sat beside him. The children climbed into their laps, smiling brightly. The billionaire looked at her in the dim light, their faces close, and for the first time there was no rage in her eyes, only exhaustion mixed with something softer. The storm outside still raged, the empire still trembled. But inside that room, for a fragile moment, there was peace, a peace built not on wealth or power, but on the bond of blood finally revealed to the world. Weeks after the judgment, the city still buzzed. Newspapers kept printing stories. Business magazines dissected every detail. Some claimed the billionaire had ruined his empire. Others called him brave for standing by the truth. But he no longer cared. His days were no longer spent in marble offices with endless meetings. Instead, he found himself in the small shelter or at the children's side, walking them to school for the first time, watching their eyes light up as they held books instead of scraps. Their laughter filled spaces that once felt haunted by silence. Yet the road was not simple. Crowds still followed them. Reporters still tried to pry into their lives. Whispers still followed the maid when she went to the market. But something had changed. She no longer stood alone. The billionaire walked beside her, silent but strong, blocking the stairs with his presence. The board of his empire called an emergency meeting, demanding he choose between his company and the scandal now tied to his name. They told him investors were leaving, fortunes were bleeding away. They warned him that if he continued down this path the empire he built would collapse. He listened quietly, then stood and told them he had already made his choice. His children's faces meant more than all their wealth combined. And if the empire fell, it would fall with his blessing. The room erupted in shock, but his words carried a weight they could not break. By the end of the week he resigned from half his positions, selling shares, walking away from towers of glass and stone that had once defined him. The world gasped, wondering why a man of such power would willingly step down. But he walked out lighter, because now he walked towards something that mattered more. In the shelter the maid struggled with her feelings. She saw the twins glow with joy when he arrived. She saw them healthier, stronger, laughing without fear. And though her heart still carried scars, she could not deny the change. One evening as the twins played outside, she confronted him, her voice trembling. She asked if he was doing all this to ease his guilt or because he truly wanted to be a father. He looked at her with tired but steady eyes and said guilt had brought him back but love kept him there. She turned away, unable to stop her tears. For years she had carried anger like armor. Now she felt it cracking. The turning point came when the twins fell asleep holding both their hands at once, small fingers clutching tightly, their faces peaceful. The maid and the billionaire exchanged a look in the candlelight. A silent understanding that no matter the past, no matter the scars, they were bound together now, not by choice but by blood and by the innocence of the children who needed them both. Outside the world still roared with gossip, but inside that small room the noise faded. He whispered a promise to never let them face hunger again, to never let them walk alone again. She did not answer, but for the first time she did not pull her hand away. And so the man who once believed he was untouchable learned the true meaning of weakness and strength. Weakness in the empire he could lose overnight. Strength in the tiny arms of the twins who clung to him with love he did not deserve but would spend his life earning. The careless night he thought forgotten had rewritten his destiny, turning marble halls into empty shells and a broken shelter into the only home that mattered. And though the world remembered him as a billionaire, the twins would remember him as something greater, simply their father.